Apache sisters sold like cattle. Lonely rancher who bought them said, "I'll take you home." The wind whispered softly through the tall grass, carrying with it the scent of dry earth and distant wildflowers. On a small, quiet ranch, a man named Thomas lived alone. He had inherited the land from his parents, who had passed many years ago, and since then, the ranch had become both his home and his companion. Thomas was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 40s, with kind eyes that seemed to reflect the endless sky above him. He was strong and capable, yet there was a loneliness in him that not even the vast expanse of the plains could fill. Thomas' days were long and steady. He woke before dawn, tending to the cattle and mending fences, repairing tools, and making sure that the ranch ran smoothly. Each task was done with care and precision, a rhythm that gave him purpose but could not erase the emptiness in his heart. Evenings were the hardest. After a day full of work, he would sit on the porch of his modest home, watching the sun dip behind distant hills, feeling the silence press in around him. The laughter and warmth of a family had been a distant memory for Thomas, and over the years the quiet had grown heavier, almost like a companion he couldn't shake. On the outskirts of the nearby town, a different story was unfolding. Two young girls, sisters, were standing nervously near a large wooden fence. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. They had grown up together, sharing secrets and small joys, finding comfort in each other's presence. But today was different. Today they were far from home, far from the lives they knew, and surrounded by strangers whose intentions were unclear. The world felt enormous and cold, and the girls clung together, whispering softly to each other in their own language. Their hearts were pounding, and though they didn't fully understand what lay ahead, they knew that life as they had known it was changing forever. The town's marketplace was a flurry of activity. Stalls lined the streets, selling fruits, tools, fabrics, and trinkets. People bustled about, bargaining and laughing, the clatter of voices mingling with the occasional whistle of the wind. In one corner of the market, a small crowd had gathered around an unusual sight: two young girls, standing quietly, unsure of why so many people were watching them. Some townspeople whispered among themselves, curious and judgmental, while others simply glanced and walked away. To most, the girls were a curiosity, something unusual in the otherwise ordinary morning bustle. But to Thomas, who had been passing by on horseback, there was something different, something he could not put into words. He had come into town for supplies, intending only to pick up a few tools and some feed for his animals. But as he rode past the market, his eyes fell on the girls. There was a quiet dignity in the way they held themselves, despite their fear. He felt a strange tug at his heart, a connection he didn't understand. Slowing his horse, he dismounted and walked toward them. The market noise seemed to fade as he approached. The girls looked up at him, uncertainty in their gaze. He offered a gentle smile and spoke softly. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice calm and steady, careful not to frighten them further. For a moment there was silence. The girls did not answer. They only exchanged glances, unsure whether they could trust this stranger. But there was something in Thomas' presence that was different from the others. He did not push. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood there patiently, waiting. After a long moment, one of the sisters whispered something to the other, and then they nodded. The older sister stepped forward slightly. Thomas could see the fear in her eyes, but also a glimmer of hope, a tiny spark that told him she might be willing to take a chance. The auctioneer, noticing Thomas' attention on the girls, called out to him, "Sir, are you interested?" "We're just about to start." His voice was loud and commanding, meant to stir excitement and urgency. Thomas shook his head gently. I want to take them home," he said quietly, almost to himself, but loud enough for those nearby to hear. There was a murmur in the crowd. Some people stared at him, confused. Others laughed quietly, assuming he was joking. It was unusual for a man to show interest in two young girls in this way, especially when most people treated such matters as a transaction, a simple exchange of money. But Thomas' tone was sincere, full of quiet resolve. The auctioneer frowned, unsure how to respond, but Thomas remained calm, his eyes never leaving the sisters. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small pouch of coins. "I'll pay what's fair," he said. "I'll take them home." The murmurs grew louder. Some people whispered that he must be lonely, that he was doing this out of pity or loneliness. Others questioned why a man with no family would want to take in two young girls, but Thomas did not argue or explain further. He simply waited, showing patience and steadiness, letting his actions speak louder than any words. The girls' eyes widened as they realized he meant what he said. The older sister looked at Thomas, searching his face for any hint of falsehood, any sign that he might not be kind. When she found none, she looked at her younger sister, who nodded slightly, a silent gesture of trust. For the first time that morning, the fear that had gripped them began to ease. There was still uncertainty, yes, but there was also hope. They could sense that Thomas was different from the others who had crowded around them. He was not there to frighten them, to control them, or to use them. He was there to offer a choice, a chance for safety and care. Thomas gently extended his hand toward the older sister. "Come with me," he said softly. "I'll take you home." The girls hesitated for only a moment before taking his hands. The small act of trust felt monumental, like a fragile bridge forming between two worlds, one filled with fear and uncertainty, and the other with kindness and possibility. As they walked away from the market together, the crowd began to disperse, and the girls felt the first real sense of relief they had known in days. The journey back to the ranch was quiet at first. The sisters were unsure of what to say, and Thomas respected their silence. He spoke softly when necessary, pointing out small wonders along the way, a bird perched on a fence post, the glimmer of morning dew on the grass, the vast expanse of sky stretching endlessly above. Slowly, the tension in the girls' shoulders eased. They began to relax, realizing that Thomas' world was different from the one they had just left. It was calm, safe, and full of steady rhythms that promised care and protection. By the time they arrived at the ranch, the sun was high in the sky. Thomas led them through the fields, showing them the small home that would be theirs for now. The house was simple but clean, with sturdy wooden walls and a fireplace that filled the room with warmth. Outside, the field stretched wide, dotted with cattle and a few scattered trees. The girls looked around in awe, marveling at the open space, the quiet beauty, and the sense of freedom that had been missing from their lives. Thomas knelt down to meet them at eye level. "This is your home," he said gently. "You can stay here as long as you want. You will be safe, and no one will hurt you here." The girls felt a warmth in their hearts, a sense of relief that made them catch their breath. For the first time in a long while, they felt a flicker of hope, a small but powerful belief that perhaps life could be kind, that there were people who truly cared. That evening, the three of them sat by the fire. Thomas served a simple meal, and though the sisters ate cautiously at first, they soon began to relax. The sound of laughter, soft and hesitant, filled the room as Thomas told gentle stories about the ranch, the animals, and life on the plains. The girls listened with wide eyes, absorbing every word, feeling a sense of belonging that had seemed impossible only hours before. As night fell, Thomas showed the sisters to their rooms. They lay awake for a long time, thinking about the day's events, the strange kindness of a man they had just met, and the sense of safety that seemed almost magical. Though the past still lingered, full of uncertainty and fear, they began to feel that maybe, just maybe, they had found a place where they could heal, grow, and perhaps even be happy. Thomas, sitting alone on the porch after tucking the girls in, looked out at the stars twinkling above the plains. He felt a quiet joy he had not known in years, a sense that his life had changed in a way he could not have anticipated. For the first time in a long time, the loneliness that had weighed on him seemed lighter, replaced by a purpose that filled him with warmth and hope. And so, on that quiet ranch beneath the vast sky, a story began, one of trust, care, and the first delicate steps toward a new life. A story where kindness could overcome fear, and where even the loneliest hearts could find connection. The sun had risen that morning, and though the day had been long, it ended with a promise that sometimes, even in the most unexpected places, home could be found. The morning after their arrival at the ranch, the sun rose slowly over the open fields, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. The two sisters, still cautious and uncertain, awoke to the sound of birds singing outside their small windows. It was a sound they hadn't noticed in a long time, the pure, gentle music of the morning, unbroken by harsh words or hurried footsteps. They lay in their beds for a while, listening, as if trying to convince themselves that this new place was real, that they were not dreaming. Slowly, they got up and dressed, their movements quiet, careful not to disturb each other. Thomas had already started his morning chores. The sound of hooves against the soft earth and the gentle lowing of cattle filled the air. He moved with steady purpose, feeding the animals, checking fences, and preparing for the day ahead. He noticed the girls peeking out from the door, their eyes curious yet wary. He smiled gently at them, giving them a nod of encouragement. "Good morning," he said softly. "You can come out when you're ready. There's plenty to see and do." His voice was calm and patient, offering a sense of safety that the girls could feel, even if they did not fully understand it. Slowly, the older sister took the first step outside. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of grass, soil, and animals. She inhaled deeply, feeling a strange mix of relief and anxiety. Her younger sister followed, clinging lightly to her hand. Together, they stepped onto the porch and looked around. Everything was new: the open fields, the small wooden fences, the barns filled with hay, and the gentle sound of animals. It was a world far removed from the crowded streets and market they had left behind. Thomas walked toward them with a basket of fresh bread and a small jar of honey. "I thought you might like something to start the day," he said, offering the basket. The sisters hesitated, unsure if they could trust such kindness. But the smell of the bread, warm and comforting, was irresistible. They accepted it quietly, nodding their thanks. Thomas did not push them to eat or talk. He simply gave them space, allowing them to adjust to the rhythm of life on the ranch at their own pace. The morning passed slowly, filled with small discoveries. Thomas showed them how to feed the chickens, how to collect fresh eggs, and how to care for the animals without frightening them. The sisters watched carefully, mimicking his actions, their movements tentative at first but gradually becoming more confident. For the first time in many days, they felt a sense of accomplishment and purpose. It was not the grand adventures or exciting moments that marked this day, but the simple tasks, repeated with care and patience, that began to build trust and familiarity. By midday, Thomas led them to a small stream that ran along the edge of the property. The water sparkled in the sunlight, clear and cool, flowing gently over smooth stones. He knelt by the edge, dipping his hands into the water. "You can wash up here if you like," he said, smiling. The sisters watched him, fascinated by the simplicity of it all. Hesitantly, they joined him, letting the cool water run over their hands and arms. The sensation was refreshing, almost magical, and for a brief moment they laughed, a soft, almost shy sound that made Thomas' heart lift. After lunch, Thomas suggested they explore the ranch. The girls followed him along winding paths through fields of tall grass and wildflowers. Birds flitted from tree to tree, and rabbits darted across the open land. The older sister pointed to a distant hill and asked what it was. Thomas explained that it was a place he often went to watch the sunset. "You should see it one evening," he said. It's beautiful. You'll feel like you can see the whole world from up there." The sisters nodded, their eyes wide with wonder. The idea of a place where they could feel free and safe was almost unbelievable, yet something in Thomas' voice made them believe it could be real. As they walked, Thomas noticed that the girls were hesitant to speak, even when asked questions. He did not press them, understanding that trust could not be rushed. Instead, he told them stories about the land, how he had grown up here, how the seasons changed, and how the animals were part of the family. The girls listened intently, gradually opening their minds to the idea that this man who had taken them in without question could be trusted. Little by little, their fear began to melt, replaced by curiosity and cautious hope. In the afternoon, a small task became an opportunity for connection. Thomas asked the girls if they wanted to help him collect firewood. They agreed, and soon they were working together, carrying small bundles and stacking them neatly by the barn. There was laughter and teasing, small moments of playfulness that had been absent from their lives for so long. The older sister discovered that she could swing a small axe safely under Thomas' guidance, and the younger sister found joy in balancing the pieces of wood carefully. Through these simple tasks, they began to understand the rhythm of life on the ranch, and with it, the gentle presence of someone who cared for them without asking for anything in return. Evenings on the ranch had a different magic. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the fields, Thomas prepared a simple dinner. The girls helped with small chores, such as setting the table and pouring water. They still spoke little, but their silence was no longer tense. It was comfortable, a sign that they were beginning to feel at home. Thomas told stories as they ate about his childhood, the stars, and the quiet wonders of the plains. The girls listened, sometimes asking questions, sometimes simply watching him with wide, thoughtful eyes. Slowly, their walls began to come down. One evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of purple, Thomas suggested a short walk to the nearby hill. The girls hesitated at first, but curiosity won over fear. They climbed together, the older sister leading the younger, and reached the top just as the sun touched the horizon. The view took their breath away, the vast plains stretching endlessly, the sky ablaze with color, and the distant town appearing like a tiny dot far away. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, the sisters felt a sense of freedom, a feeling that they could breathe again. Thomas stood beside them quietly, letting them take it all in. There were no demands, no expectations, just the quiet presence of someone who cared. That night, after returning from the hill, the girls began to talk softly to each other in whispers. They shared small memories, little stories from their lives before, and for a moment, it was as if the world outside the ranch did not exist. Thomas listened from a distance, respecting their privacy, understanding that healing was not immediate but gradual. He knew that trust could not be forced. It had to be earned through patience, consistency, and gentle care. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of life on the ranch settled into a comforting pattern. The sisters began to wake with the sun, help with chores, explore the fields, and learn about the animals. Thomas continued to guide them patiently, never pushing, never rushing. Slowly, the girls learned to speak more openly, to laugh, and to share their thoughts. They discovered that life could be kind, that there were people who truly cared, and that even after fear and uncertainty, hope could blossom again. One morning, as the first light touched the fields, Thomas noticed the sisters standing near the barn, looking out at the horizon. Their eyes were bright with anticipation and curiosity. He walked over, asking if they wanted to help with the cattle that day. They eagerly agreed, and for the first time, he saw genuine excitement in their expressions. It was a small victory, but a meaningful one, proof that trust, once fragile, was beginning to take root. As they worked together, the sisters began to talk more freely. They asked Thomas about the animals, about the plants, about life on the ranch. They shared small stories from their past, laughing softly at memories both happy and sad. Thomas listened with patience, answering their questions and offering guidance, but always with respect for their feelings and experiences. In these moments, a bond began to form, a quiet, unspoken understanding that they were no longer alone, that there was someone in their lives who would stand by them without judgment. By evening, the girls had learned a great deal about life on the ranch. They had discovered the beauty of routine, the satisfaction of small accomplishments, and the comfort of kindness. They had also learned that trust was possible, even after fear and uncertainty. Thomas, in turn, felt a sense of fulfillment and joy that he had not known in years. The quiet ranch, once a symbol of his solitude, had become a place of connection, healing, and hope. And so, as the sun set over the rolling fields, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, a new chapter began on the ranch. It was a chapter filled with small victories, gentle lessons, and the gradual blossoming of trust and friendship. The sisters, once uncertain and afraid, were beginning to feel the first true sense of safety and belonging in their lives. Thomas, once lonely and isolated, had found purpose and connection once more. Together, they were taking the first steps toward a future filled with hope, care, and the quiet promise of home. Life on the ranch had begun to settle into a quiet rhythm, but change, as it often does, arrived without warning. The two sisters had started to feel comfortable, laughing softly over shared chores, and discovering the joys of a life filled with gentle routines and open spaces. Yet beneath their growing smiles and tentative trust, there remained a shadow, a fear that had been ingrained in them by past experiences. It was a fear that sometimes made them flinch at sudden movements, hesitate to speak, or retreat to a quiet corner when something unfamiliar occurred. Thomas, though patient and kind, noticed these moments. He understood that trust could not be built overnight, and that the past had left its mark on the girls in ways that would take time to heal. He watched carefully, speaking only when needed, giving them the space to adjust to a life that was still new, still uncertain. Some days he worried that despite his efforts, the weight of their past might be too heavy for them to carry. But he refused to give up, knowing that small acts of kindness and consistency could gradually work miracles. One afternoon, as the sun climbed high in the sky, Thomas led the sisters to the far side of the ranch, where a small orchard of apple trees grew. The branches were heavy with fruit, and the air was filled with the sweet, subtle scent of ripening apples. "Today," Thomas said gently, "we'll pick some apples for the kitchen. It's a simple task, but it's also fun." The girls exchanged a glance, hesitating. The older sister stepped forward first, her hands brushing the leaves as if unsure whether she was allowed to touch anything. Her younger sister followed closely behind, mirroring her every move. Thomas knelt down beside them, showing how to carefully twist the apples from the branches without damaging the tree. The girls began to mimic him, their movements slow at first, then gaining confidence. For a while there was laughter as apples fell from the branches, some rolling across the grass. It was a moment of pure joy, a small glimpse of freedom that had been missing from their lives for so long. Yet, even in this simple activity, the past lingered like a shadow. Every time a branch snapped unexpectedly or a bird flew too close, the girls flinched, their hearts racing, as if danger were still near. Thomas noticed these reactions and knelt beside them once more. "It's okay," he said softly, placing a reassuring hand on the older sister's shoulder. "Nothing here will hurt you. You're safe." The words were gentle but firm, and slowly the tension in the girls' bodies began to ease. They continued picking apples, learning to trust not only Thomas but the quiet safety of the ranch itself. By the time the sun began to lower toward the horizon, they had gathered a small basket full of fruit, their smiles more relaxed and genuine than they had been in days. But the sense of peace could not last forever. Later that evening, As Thomas prepared dinner and the sisters helped with small chores, a loud noise from the nearby woods startled them. A branch had snapped under the weight of an unseen animal, and for a moment, fear gripped the girls' hearts. The older sister froze, clutching the younger one's hand, her eyes wide with worry. Thomas immediately moved to their side, kneeling to meet them at eye level. "It's all right," he said firmly but kindly. "Nothing is going to hurt you. It's just an animal in the woods." His calm presence and steady voice helped to soothe their fear, though the tension in their shoulders lingered. That night, after the girls had been tucked into bed, Thomas sat on the porch alone. The stars were bright, scattered across the dark sky like tiny lanterns. He thought about the day, about the moments of joy and the flashes of fear. He knew that healing was not linear. There would be setbacks, moments when the past threatened to overshadow the present. And yet, he also knew that every small step forward was progress. The sisters were learning to trust, learning that kindness and safety could exist in the world, even when it had once seemed impossible. The following days brought more challenges. One morning, the older sister found herself reluctant to leave her room. The younger sister wanted to explore the fields, but her older sister's hesitation made her stay back. Thomas noticed this and approached gently. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked softly. The older sister shook her head, her eyes downcast. Thomas did not push. He simply sat nearby, giving her the time she needed. After a while, she spoke in a small, quiet voice, telling him about a memory that had frightened her long ago. Thomas listened carefully, never interrupting, never judging, simply offering a presence that said without words, "I am here, and you are safe." Gradually, the older sister began to open up more, sharing small stories and thoughts with Thomas and her younger sister. Yet there were moments when the past would resurface unexpectedly. A sudden noise, a shadow across the room, a stranger in town, and fear would return in full force. During these times, Thomas would calmly guide the girls, offering reassurance and patience. He taught them to breathe deeply, to focus on the present, and to remind themselves that they were safe. These lessons were small, simple, yet powerful, helping the sisters build resilience and strength from within. One afternoon, Thomas suggested that they take a short trip into the nearby town to buy supplies. The sisters hesitated at first, unsure of the unfamiliar streets and crowds, but with Thomas by their side, they slowly gained confidence. Walking through the marketplace, the girls kept close to him, watching and learning. They saw people laughing, vendors calling out their wares, and children playing in the open squares. It was a world both strange and fascinating, and the sisters marveled at its sights and sounds. Though they were cautious, they also felt a sense of possibility, that the world outside the ranch could be kind too if approached carefully. During this trip, an encounter tested the girls' growing trust. A group of children in the market laughed at their clothes and tried to tease them. For a moment, fear and shame flooded their hearts, and the older sister wanted to flee. Thomas stepped forward calmly, speaking to the children gently but firmly. "It's not kind to laugh at others," he said. "We should treat everyone with respect." The children quickly quieted, sensing Thomas' quiet strength and sincerity. The sisters looked at him with gratitude, understanding that they were not alone, that they had someone who would protect them not with anger, but with quiet courage and care. Returning to the ranch that evening, the sisters felt a mix of relief and accomplishment. They had faced fear and uncertainty, yet they had also learned that trust and bravery could coexist. Thomas praised their courage, but he never pressured them. He understood that true confidence came slowly, built through experience and reassurance rather than demands. That night, as the girls lay in bed, they whispered to each other, sharing their thoughts and small victories. For the first time, they allowed themselves to feel proud, to recognize that they were growing stronger, even as the shadows of the past lingered. As the weeks passed, the sisters faced more challenges. A sudden storm hit the plains with heavy rain and strong winds. The girls were frightened, hiding under blankets as the house creaked and the wind howled. Thomas calmly reassured them, lighting the fireplace and explaining that storms were natural and could not harm them inside the safety of the house. He guided them through the experience, showing how to remain calm and find comfort even in frightening circumstances. By the end of the storm, the girls had learned that fear could be faced, managed, and overcome with patience and care. Through all these moments, small tasks, sudden fears, trips into town, and storms, the bond between Thomas and the sisters deepened. They learned to rely on him, not as someone who controlled them, but as someone who supported and guided them. Trust, once fragile, began to take root in their hearts, allowing them to explore, to laugh, and to grow. Thomas, in turn, found joy in their progress, feeling a sense of purpose and connection that had been missing from his life for so long. Yet, the journey was not without setbacks. One evening, the older sister, overwhelmed by a sudden memory, refused to eat dinner and retreated to her room. Thomas approached slowly, respecting her space. He did not demand that she explain, but he offered gentle words of comfort, reminding her that she was safe and cared for. Hours passed, and eventually she came out quietly, accepting a small portion of food and sharing a soft smile. These moments reminded Thomas that healing was gradual, filled with ups and downs, and that patience was as important as any other lesson he could teach. And so, life on the ranch continued. Each day brought small challenges, quiet victories, and the gradual building of trust. The sisters learned that fear could be faced, that kindness could be real, and that even the shadows of the past could be softened by consistent care and patience. Thomas watched them grow with pride and tenderness, knowing that every step forward, no matter how small, was a triumph. By the time the sun set over the plains, casting long golden shadows across the fields, the sisters sat quietly on the porch with Thomas, watching the colors of the sky deepen and change. They were still cautious, still learning to navigate the world with trust and hope, but they were no longer afraid to take the first steps. In the soft glow of the evening, a sense of quiet triumph filled the air, a reminder that even in the face of fear and uncertainty, resilience, patience, and care could create the possibility of healing and happiness. Life on the ranch had slowly begun to settle into a steady rhythm, yet it was clear that both Thomas and the two sisters were still learning about one another. The past, with all its uncertainty and fear, had left a mark on the girls, and trust was something that grew slowly, step by step. For Thomas, patience had become a daily lesson, and he had come to understand that kindness alone was not always enough. It required consistency, understanding, and the willingness to let the girls find their own courage at their own pace. One morning, as sunlight poured over the fields, Thomas suggested a new kind of task. "Today," he said gently, "I think it's time for you both to help with planting a small garden." The sisters exchanged a hesitant glance. The older one, still cautious, wasn't sure if she wanted to take part, while the younger one's curiosity began to grow. The idea of tending plants, of nurturing something small and alive, seemed both exciting and a little frightening. "It's nothing to worry about," Thomas reassured them, smiling. "We'll take it slow together." They started by clearing a small patch of soil near the house. The older sister dug slowly, feeling the cool earth in her hands, while the younger one followed her lead, her eyes shining with curiosity. At first, the work was simple and careful, removing stones, loosening the soil, and marking out where the seeds would go. Thomas guided them patiently, showing them how to work together, and explaining that plants, like people, needed care, attention, and time to grow. The girls listened intently, their hands moving with increasing confidence. It was a small act, but for them, it felt meaningful, a step toward feeling capable and connected to the world around them. As the day progressed, The sisters began to relax and even laugh softly when small mistakes happened. An overturned pot, a dropped seed, or a patch of soil that refused to cooperate became opportunities for humor and learning. Thomas joined in their laughter, sharing his own stories of failed gardening attempts when he was younger. Through this simple activity, a bond grew stronger between them. A bond built not only on trust, but on shared experiences, moments of joy, and the quiet understanding that mistakes were allowed. Later that afternoon, Thomas suggested a walk to the nearby creek. The girls were hesitant at first, still wary of the unfamiliar world beyond the ranch, but they agreed. The walk was slow and quiet, filled with the sounds of water trickling over smooth stones and birds calling from the trees above. Thomas encouraged the girls to notice the details around them, the color of the leaves, the patterns in the rocks, the tiny insects moving across the ground. The older sister began to point out shapes in the clouds, while the younger one carefully picked up small pebbles to examine. For the first time, they allowed themselves to appreciate the beauty of the world without fear or worry. At the creek, Thomas knelt by the water and showed the girls how to skip stones across the surface. At first, the older sister was hesitant, thinking she might fail or make a mistake. Thomas gently guided her hand, showing the right angle and force. The stone jumped once, twice, then glided across the water with a satisfying splash. A small cheer escaped her lips, and she felt a rush of pride. The younger sister quickly followed, experimenting with different stones and laughing when hers bounced unexpectedly. The moment, simple as it was, became a milestone in their journey, a reminder that courage and joy could exist side by side. As the sun began to lower, casting warm golden light across the landscape, Thomas invited the girls to share their thoughts and dreams. The older sister hesitated, unsure if she could speak openly, but slowly, words began to flow. She told Thomas about small hopes she had for the future, learning new things, exploring the world, and feeling safe in her own home. The younger sister added her own thoughts, about wanting to laugh freely, to play, and to care for the animals. Thomas listened carefully, his heart swelling with quiet pride. He realized that these conversations were a turning point, a moment when the girls were beginning to envision a life beyond fear and uncertainty. That evening, as they returned to the ranch, Thomas introduced another gentle lesson. "Tomorrow, we'll make a small picnic," he said. "We'll gather food from the garden and cook together. It's a way to celebrate what we've accomplished and enjoy the day." The sisters nodded, their excitement evident in their quick steps and bright smiles. The idea of creating something together, sharing it, and enjoying the fruits of their labor was a new experience for them, and one that slowly reinforced the sense of belonging and care they felt on the ranch. The following day, they set out to prepare for the picnic. Thomas guided the girls in picking vegetables from the garden, washing them carefully, and preparing a simple meal. There was laughter and playful teasing as small accidents happened. Water spilled on the counter, leaves fell into the basket, but these moments only strengthened their bond. The girls learned that mistakes were part of life, and that they could still find joy even when things did not go perfectly. By the time the meal was ready, they had learned not only how to cook together but also how to cooperate, trust, and appreciate the small joys of life. During the picnic, sitting under a large oak tree with the sun warming their faces, Thomas encouraged the girls to talk about their favorite memories from the past and their hopes for the future. The older sister shared a story of a small act of kindness she had witnessed long ago, and the younger one spoke of her dream of learning new things every day. Thomas responded with encouragement and gentle guidance, showing that their thoughts and feelings mattered, that their voices were valued. These conversations marked another turning point, a moment when the sisters began to understand that their past did not have to define them, and that hope and happiness were within reach. As the days turned into weeks, the girls began to take more initiative on the ranch. They fed the animals, tended the garden, and helped with chores without hesitation. Thomas noticed that their confidence had grown, their laughter was more frequent, and their curiosity about the world was becoming stronger. The older sister began to ask questions about the animals, the plants, and even the stars above. The younger one experimented with small projects, trying out new ways to care for the chickens and the garden. Each small step, each small success, reinforced the sense of safety, trust, and belonging they had begun to feel. One evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of pink and purple, Thomas suggested a quiet activity, stargazing. The girls hesitated at first, unsure what to expect, but followed him to a small hill near the ranch. Lying on the soft grass, they watched the stars appear one by one, shining like tiny lanterns in the darkening sky. Thomas pointed out constellations, told stories of the stars, and encouraged the girls to imagine their own stories. For the first time, the sisters felt a sense of wonder and freedom, a reminder that the world could be beautiful, safe, and full of possibility. The turning point of this chapter in their lives came gradually but unmistakably. The girls began to smile more freely, to laugh without hesitation, and to speak their minds. They explored the ranch with curiosity rather than fear, helped Thomas with chores without being asked, and even reached out to each other with care and encouragement. Thomas, in turn, felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond the satisfaction of guiding them through tasks. He realized that he had helped nurture not only trust and safety, but also resilience, courage, and hope. The older sister, once quiet and withdrawn, began to take small leadership roles. She guided her younger sister during chores, helped plan activities, and even suggested new ideas for the garden. The younger sister, inspired by her sister's courage, began to take more risks, experimenting with animals, trying new foods, and exploring areas of the ranch she had once feared. Thomas observed these changes with quiet pride, understanding that the seeds of independence, confidence, and joy had taken root in both girls. By the time autumn approached, the garden was flourishing, the animals were well cared for, and the girls had become active participants in ranch life. The bond between Thomas and the sisters had deepened into something strong and lasting, a relationship built on trust, patience, and mutual respect. The turning point had not been marked by a single dramatic event, but by countless small moments, shared laughter, gentle guidance, quiet conversations, and the consistent presence of kindness. One crisp evening, as the wind carried the scent of fallen leaves across the fields, Thomas sat with the sisters on the porch. The sky was painted with the colors of sunset, and the ranch was bathed in a warm, golden light. The girls leaned against him, comfortable and relaxed, their faces reflecting a new sense of security and belonging. "Thank you," the older sister whispered softly, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. "For everything." Thomas smiled, feeling a deep warmth in his heart. "You don't need to thank me," he said gently. "You've been brave and you've worked hard to find your way here. That is what matters." And in that quiet moment, beneath the vast sky and the gentle glow of the setting sun, the sisters realized something they had never known before. That home could be more than a place. It could be a feeling, a sense of safety, care, and belonging. It could be built through patience, kindness, and trust. And for Thomas, the lesson was equally clear, that even in the loneliest hearts, connection and hope could grow slowly but surely when nurtured with care and understanding. Time passed quietly on the ranch, yet it was filled with growth, change, and small moments of joy that made life feel brighter than ever before. The two sisters, once timid and fearful, had transformed under the gentle care and guidance of Thomas. Their laughter now filled the air, echoing across the fields in a way that made the ranch feel alive. They moved through the days with a sense of purpose, helping with chores, tending the garden, caring for the animals, and even exploring new corners of the property they had once been too afraid to enter. Thomas watched these changes with a mixture of pride and quiet joy. He remembered the first days when the girls had arrived, hesitant and wary, and he marveled at how far they had come. Each small victory, the way the older sister had learned to lead, the younger one's growing confidence, the shared laughter during chores, was proof that patience, kindness, and trust could nurture growth in even the most delicate hearts. The ranch, which had once been a place of solitude for Thomas, had become a home alive with connection, care, and warmth. One morning, as autumn painted the fields in shades of gold and amber, Thomas suggested that the sisters help him with a special project, building a small treehouse near the edge of the orchard. The girl's eyes widened in excitement, and for the first time the older sister spoke with certainty. "We can do it together," she said. The younger sister nodded eagerly, her face shining with anticipation. Together, the three of them set to work, gathering wood, measuring, and hammering carefully under Thomas' patient guidance. The process was slow, but it was also filled with laughter, encouragement, and teamwork. Mistakes happened, boards were misaligned, nails bent, and paint spilled. But these moments were met with gentle correction and humor rather than frustration. The sisters learned that mistakes were part of learning, part of growing, and that perseverance could lead to something wonderful. By the end of the day, the frame of the treehouse stood proudly among the branches, a symbol of effort, cooperation, and trust. As the weeks passed, the treehouse grew into a small haven, decorated with flowers, soft blankets, and handmade signs. The sisters spent hours there, reading, drawing, and talking quietly. It became a place where they could be themselves, a space that reflected their growing confidence and joy. For Thomas, watching them in that space was a source of deep satisfaction. The treehouse was more than wood and nails. It was a representation of the safe and nurturing environment he had helped create, a space where the girls could dream, explore, and feel fully at home. Life on the ranch also brought the girls into contact with the nearby town in small, meaningful ways. Thomas encouraged them to interact with the townspeople slowly, helping them understand that the world outside could be kind and welcoming. The older sister began to visit the small market with Thomas, learning to speak confidently with vendors and neighbors. She discovered a joy in simple interactions, buying fresh bread, selecting vegetables, and exchanging polite greetings. The younger sister, too, began to enjoy trips into town, marveling at the colors, sounds, and small surprises that awaited them. These experiences helped the sisters expand their understanding of the world, and their confidence grew with each visit. Evenings at the ranch became moments of reflection and bonding. Thomas, the sisters, and occasionally the animals would gather around the fireplace, sharing stories, playing small games, or simply sitting in quiet companionship. The sisters began to tell Thomas about their dreams for the future, their hopes, and even their fears. They spoke openly, without hesitation, knowing that Thomas would listen with care and without judgment. These conversations became a vital part of their growth, helping them process their experiences, learn from them, and imagine a life full of possibilities. One crisp morning, as the sisters helped Thomas repair a fence along the far field, the older sister suddenly paused and looked around. "I can't believe how much has changed," she said softly. "I feel safe now. I feel like I belong here." The younger sister nodded, her eyes bright. "Me too," she added. "I never thought I could feel this happy." Thomas knelt beside them, placing his hands gently on their shoulders. "That's because you've worked hard," he said. "You've been brave and you've trusted yourself and each other. I'm proud of both of you." The sisters smiled, a deep sense of accomplishment filling their hearts. Autumn gave way to winter, and the ranch transformed under a blanket of frost and occasional snow. The sisters learned to adapt, helping Thomas prepare firewood, feed the animals, and keep the house warm. Despite the cold, the warmth inside the home and in their hearts kept them comfortable. The treehouse was now a place they visited less often, but it remained a symbol of what they had achieved, proof that growth, patience, and courage could create something lasting and beautiful. During the holidays, Thomas and the sisters worked together to decorate the house. They strung simple garlands, placed candles on the windowsills, and baked small treats together. The joy and laughter that filled the home were unlike anything the sisters had known before. They felt included, valued, and loved, a stark contrast to the uncertainty and fear that had once dominated their lives. Thomas, too, felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The loneliness that had defined him for so many years had been replaced by the warmth of family, connection, and shared experiences. The sisters' transformation was also reflected in their interactions with the animals on the ranch. They learned to care for the livestock with patience and compassion, feeding the cattle, collecting eggs, and grooming the horses. The animals responded to their care, forming bonds that reinforced the girls' sense of responsibility and confidence. The younger sister, who had once been timid around animals, discovered a natural talent for gentleness, while the older sister learned to lead with kindness and patience. These daily experiences strengthened their trust in themselves and in Thomas, creating a stable foundation for their ongoing growth. As spring approached, the sisters helped Thomas plant new crops, repair old fences, and expand the garden. Their confidence had grown so much that they began suggesting new ideas, where to plant flowers, how to care for the animals, and even small improvements to the house. Thomas welcomed their input, encouraging them to take ownership of their environment and make it their own. The sense of autonomy and pride that the girls felt was a reflection of how far they had come, both emotionally and practically, in the safe and nurturing environment of the ranch. The turning point had come slowly, but by now it was undeniable. The sisters were no longer fearful, withdrawn, or hesitant. They had become confident, capable, and independent young individuals. Their laughter was genuine, their curiosity boundless, and their sense of belonging complete. Thomas, too, had been transformed. His loneliness had been replaced by purpose. His quiet home had become a lively sanctuary, and his heart had been filled with love, care, and gratitude. Together, they had built something lasting, not just a home, but a life full of meaning and connection. One afternoon, the sisters decided to write letters to their family, sharing their experiences, their growth, and the kindness they had found in Thomas. They carefully chose their words, expressing gratitude for the safe environment, the lessons learned, and the love they had discovered. Thomas helped them with the letters, offering guidance when needed but allowing their voices to shine. The act of writing became both a reflection and a celebration of their journey, a way to honor the past while embracing the present and the future. As the years continued, the ranch became a place of joy, learning, and shared accomplishments. The girls grew into strong, resilient young women, confident in their abilities, proud of their achievements, and secure in the knowledge that they were loved and valued. Thomas remained a steady presence, a guiding force, and a source of encouragement, teaching them the importance of kindness, patience, and trust. The bond they had formed, born from patience, care, and mutual respect, remained unbroken, a testament to the power of compassion and connection. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, painting the sky with brilliant shades of orange and gold, Thomas and the sisters sat quietly on the porch, watching the world change around them. The fields, the garden, and the animals were thriving, just as the sisters themselves had flourished. The girls leaned against Thomas, comfortable and secure, their hearts full of gratitude and hope. "I'm glad we found this place," the older sister said softly. "It feels like home." The younger sister nodded, smiling. "Yes, it really does, and we have you to thank for it." Thomas smiled, feeling a warmth that words could not fully express. "No," he replied gently. "We built it together. This is home because of all of us." And so the story of the lonely rancher who had once simply said, "I'll take you home," came to a quiet, lasting resolution. It was not marked by grand events or dramatic revelations, but by the steady, persistent presence of kindness, trust, and love. The sisters had found safety, belonging, and confidence, while Thomas had discovered connection, purpose, and joy. The ranch, once a place of solitude, had become a sanctuary of growth, healing, and hope. In the golden light of the setting sun, the trio sat together, a family not by blood but by choice, care, and the shared journey they had taken. The story of their lives, shaped by patience, compassion, and courage, would continue, carrying with it the lessons learned, the bonds formed, and the quiet understanding that home is where love, trust, and kindness flourish.